And now I'd like to invite the Global CCS Institute's CEO, Jarad Daniels, to the stage. Jarad joined the Institute as its CEO in October of last year. Many of you will know Jarad from his leadership role at the U.S. Department of Energy, where he led the Office of Strategic Planning, Analysis, and Engagement at DOE's Office of Carbon Management, capping off more than 25 years of government service. During his time with DOE, Jarad became an expert on CCS, climate change, and clean energy technologies. He's worked with many countries, many companies, multilateral organizations, NGOs on technology development and deployment and government policy. And now he's leading the Global CCS Institute. We are very fortunate. Welcome, Jarad.
Well, thank you, Jeff, very much for that kind introduction. And it is just really, really nice to be in a room physically with people and good friends. And so it's really great to be with you all today. It's so nice to see many of you again who I haven't seen for, probably a couple of years given the pandemic. And I'm really excited to be with you here today for our 10th annual DC Forum. We've got a great set of discussions throughout the day. And so I don't want to take too much time at the beginning, but just to help frame and start off our discussion today, I'd like to briefly give you an overview of the Institute's new strategy, which is new. It officially, I think, is on the website now. Officially will go into effect in our operating year that begins July 1, but we've already been marching to this drum for a while now. It's been distributed to all of our members, and it really paints the scene of, in my mind, where the Institute is best placed to partner and work with others and really do good, right, to achieve our mission, which is to accelerate CCS deployment globally. And so I've got one slide that'll sort of walk us through what that strategy looks like, and hopefully that really sets the tone for our discussions today and how we can all work together to put all these pieces together, again, to get more concrete and steel in the ground and get CCS deployed as rapidly as we can, and as all of the global climate math says we must if we're to achieve our net zero targets, our sustainable goals, 1.5, whatever it is that you want to articulate, getting us from where we are to where we want to be. I think all of the math says CCS needs to be a demonstrable part of that, and that is what the Global CCS Institute is all about. So if we could go to the next slide. Again, when I came in, I have a really, I think, well-grounded background and perspective of what the global CCS community still needs to do to advance CCS. I've been working on CCS for over 20 years at the Department of Energy, as Jeff mentioned, and that perspective then allowed me and the leadership of the Institute to really, say this is, the best use of our time and effort, our skill set as an institute to really do good, work with each other and advance CCS deployment. The agenda for today, just quickly to set the tone for the conversation, after you get done, hearing my framing here, my good colleague and friend Vicki Hollub, President and Chairman CEO of Oxy, will come up here and we'll do a fireside chat for about 40 minutes just to get her perspective on the lay of the land and how CCS fits in. We will then have another keynote speaker, Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, will join us and frame the discussion from the U.S. federal government perspective. We'll then have a networking break, and again, it's nice that we're all physically in a room, and it's nice to have that time to mingle and have those informal conversations. We'll come back, have some updates on CCS overall. We've got a really nice panel on environmental justice and frontline communities and how CCS needs to integrate with that. Something that's a growing conversation as it rightfully should be, and it's nice to see that with some strong U.S. leadership in that regard, and we'll have that conversation. There's also a panel then with some colleagues from the finance sector in terms of how can we work to finance CCS, what financing does CCS need to actually get that scale and get that broad deployment that all the math says we must work together to achieve. Again, a nice networking break and lunch. We'll come back. Jonathan Pershing from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation will be a keynote speaker to give us his thoughts from his perspective. And again, Jonathan has a broad and deep background on the topic. And we'll have a panel on CCS technologies from several technology vendors. And that will, again, just help ground the conversation where the technologies are at now, where they're moving forward. And then after another nice networking break and hopefully some nice coffee and cookies, we'll come back. We'll hear about the latest on carbon markets. We'll have a really fun panel toward the end of the day in terms of around the world with the Global Institute. We've got offices and personnel and experts in a number of locations that span most of the time zones in the world. And so that closing panel will just give you a little snippet of that global perspective, what we're working on, sort of the state of play of CCS in the various regions beyond just North America. And then Brad Crabtree, Assistant Secretary, Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, will come and join us, so you'll get 2 bites of the apple from Team Department of Energy, and then I'll provide some very brief closing remarks. So again, a really, really good and wholesome conversation throughout the day. Thank you for joining us in person, and thank you for joining us virtually as well. On the next slide, this is, I think, just at high level, if you're going to take away anything from the day in terms of what's the Institute going to do over the next 5 years, this is, in my mind, kind of what frames where I think we can do the most instrumental good as an agile, essentially nonprofit organization that is member-based, member-driven, and is just a nice mix of government members and private sector members and NGO members and financial sector members, and all of this, with about 40 employees right now in the Institute. It's just a really nice compact mix of chemical engineers and engineers that know the above ground capture kit, and PhD geologists that really know the subsurface aspect well, lawyers that know the legal reg policy inner workings of CCS in a global basis, right, and all that landscape of which we need to operate to successfully deploy CCS, again, at scale and in a global basis. And then folks that are really developed advocacy and communication and outreach skills, right? To have those conversations with all our members and our clients, to have that conversation with the broader general public, with decision makers and regulators, and really frame where CCS fits into the broader context of all of what we need to do in a technology-enabled path to achieve our sustainable goals and our climate mitigation objectives. And so when we came to write the strategy for the Institute, and again, over the next 5 years, it's really to get back to the roots of the Institute, to focus on the advocacy, right? To harness all of that technical skill set and that global perspective and say, what can we do to help inform those conversations with key decision makers, right? To advance CCS. All the climate math says we need it there. Time is not on our side. And so the more that we can connect the dots, facilitate those conversations, have discussions like this with a broad audience, that's a really appropriate and useful role for where the Institute is positioned. I think as an engineer, I always look at what's the most efficient way to approach a problem, and I think in terms of that advocacy role, one of the most efficient ways that the Institute can do good is to provide really catalytic thought leadership, right? Harness our expertise and put out pieces that are on critical path issues for CCS deployment and get those into the conversation, right? Whether it's to government energy ministries, whether it's to leaders of industry beyond the oil and gas sector that already know this space pretty well, but all those other hard to abate, carbon intensive sectors like cement and steel and fertilizers, and they know their business well. They don't really know, nor should they, up to this point, about CO2 transport or geologic storage of CO2 to keep it from contributing to climate change. And so we're well positioned to help advocate, help educate those communities, and again, on behalf of that global CCS community, bring that conversation forward. One of the ways I want the Institute to operate is really in partnership with others. We're not the only organization trying to advocate and advance CCS. There's a number of organizations out there, whether it's on the government side, the IEA-GHG, for example, or the IEA, or the Clean Energy Ministerial, or Mission Innovation. There's a number of mechanisms and platforms. We should all be working together to advocate and advance CCS. In the NGO community, right? Clean Air Task Force and Environmental Defense Fund and so many organizations like that. If you go to Europe, Bologna. If you go to other countries, Carbon Capture and Storage Association in the UK context, right? We can work with them to, again, to leverage each other's outreach abilities, to leverage each other's technical expertise, to partner to accelerate CCS deployment. That's a good way for us to work. And I think the Institute, as again, a global organization, is extremely well placed to connect the dots and to find ways to efficiently work with others to do more as quickly and responsibly as we can. When I was at the Department of Energy, one of the needs and opportunities I saw for the broader global CCS community was to really bring the conversation of CCS to the financial community so that they would better understand the role of CCS alongside all the other low carbon options that are available to society to move toward decarbonization. And so, while I was at DOE worked with other countries to stand up a CCUS initiative under the Clean Energy Ministerial, right? And as an example, that's a great set of work that's going forward, is still going forward with my DOE colleagues, again, to start to engage the financial sector. I think the Institute is well positioned to add to that, to work with that and expand to better engage the financial community and to bring the CCS conversation to them. My working definition of the financial community is broad. It's not just commercial banks that are going to try to finance projects. It also includes development banks like World Bank and ADB that are going to sort of pave the way forward in the developing realm. It also includes sort of the entire landscape of finance, from ESG rating schemes in organizations, to financial disclosure efforts, to carbon markets, voluntary and compulsory. And it's that whole sort of financial landscape or microcosm that we need to do a better job as a CCS community to let them understand the role of CCS, the value proposition of CCS. This needs to be a two-way conversation where we can help edify them on CCS, and we can understand from the financial sector what is their risk appetite, how do they look at CCS alongside all the other options they have for investment opportunities, and really have that conversation. And so that's a large part of the Institute's strategy as well going forward, is to sort of, with the agility that the Institute has, to really work with others, partner with others, and really lean forward and engage the financial sector. And again, at the end of the day, if we're successful, I mean, just think of where the wind and solar industry is now in terms of how easy it is to flow capital investment to wind and solar, right, versus where it was 15 or 20 years ago, right? That's what's needed to advance CCS, right? Government is great to sort of get demonstration projects and first of a kind out there. To get CCS to scale, we need this to be led by champions in the private sector. We need this to be financed by the broader financial community on fair commercial terms. And again, we're not quite there yet, but I think the Institute, that's part of our mandate, that's part of our opportunity over the next several years to really help champion and lead that conversation. So at high level, that's sort of our strategy. Again, focus on advocacy, support that by catalytic thought leadership. What the Institute has always done well since it was founded over a decade ago is knowledge sharing, and today is just a great example, right? And we're going to continue to do that, share our technical knowledge, connect the dots, bring people from various, job opportunities and sectors together to have a conversation on all of these topics that are instrumental and critical to getting CCS from where we are now to where all the climate math says it needs to be. Right now on a global basis, we capture about 40 million ton per annum of CO2 through carbon capture and storage. Most of the analysis out there says we need to increase that by an order of 100 by sometime in the middle of next decade to around 4 gigaton. And if you look at, say, the IEA analysis, if you think their analysis is about the right order of magnitude, they don't have a crystal ball that's any clearer than anybody else, but it's a pretty good set of analysis. They project that all-in CCS needs to contribute on the order of 7.5 gigaton of carbon dioxide emission, reduction by 2050, right? And that's from a number of sources: stationary sources in the power sector, hard to abate industry sectors, right? And if we get woefully behind, right, the carbon dioxide removal aspects, direct air capture, right, bioenergy with CCS, that needs all of the entire value chain of carbon capture and storage to come to fruition as well. And so with that as sort of framing remarks of where the Institute plans to go, I look forward to the conversation and the discussion.